So I'd like to take a moment to thank you for coming to the session, for everything that you do at your companies, and for one another in the community. And I'm Jennifer Lee, Lead Admin Evangelist at Salesforce, and I'm super excited to be here with my colleagues, Jennifer Liao, Senior Product Designer, and Sam Reynard, a Senior Director of Product, as well as Jeff Krantz, Product Manager at Risk Connect. And here's your agenda. So Jennifer's going to talk about creating those great user experiences. Then I'm going to talk about getting started with screen flow components out of the box. Jeff's going to talk about how to elevate your screen flows by applying advanced techniques using the Lightning design system. And lastly, Sam's going to wrap us up by showing us a sneak peek into the roadmap. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Jen. My name is Jennifer. I'm on the Flow design team, specifically focused on screens. So we're going to share some tips that you can use for all your screen building. But before we do that, we need to identify our user. But why is that important, and why does it matter? Well, depending on who your user is, this will really affect how you build your screen. Yes, can you hear me now better? Okay, thanks. So yes, we need to identify our user because this is very important and it will affect how we build our screen. So for example, is your user a customer who's coming to the screen for the first time and might need a little bit more guidance? Or are they an employee who's going to be using this every day and so therefore is going to rely on efficiency and speed? It's really easy to just start building from spec and just, start building right away in your screen builder, but it will be really beneficial to take a step back and think about these things, such as where is your user using the screen? Are they out on the field, on a mobile device or tablet, or maybe they're on the phone with their customer at a desk? Ultimately, this is our goal. We are trying to increase form completion and reduce form abandonment. So just keep this statement in the back of your mind while we go through all these tips. So how can we do that? Well, we spend a lot of time building really complex and beautiful flows, but the fact of the matter is your user is trying to get through these screens as quickly as possible. So how can we do this and help them do this quickly, correctly, but also giving them a good user experience? Well, our first tip is to set time expectations. Let users know for those longer flows and screens that they might have to set some time aside to complete this. And you can do this with display text. You can insert this at the top by letting people know how many steps there are, what step that they're currently on, or even give them a hint of how many minutes they need to set aside. How many times have we been given a survey, for instance, only to realize that this is going to take a long time, and what do? We abandon it. So that's what we're trying to minimize. Also, our next tip is to break those screens, those long screens, into multiple forms if needed. We can do a lot of cool things with reactivity and make one long screen, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. Breaking this apart helps give the user context, it helps minimize those errors and those skip fields, and also it's beneficial for you in the future when and if you need to come back and make edits because everything's organized in a meaningful way. Now, speaking of organization, how do we organize each individual screen? Well, we love utilizing the section component because here you can use columns and rows, and you can use custom headers to title each section. When you do this, think about where your screen is being launched from. If it's a narrow modal, for instance, or maybe a side panel, you might want to stick mostly to rows. So think about your real estate that you have, and remember that your users all have different screen sizes and resolutions, so you're going to want to test on as many form factors as you can before you publish. Now, our next tip is a big one because we're really harnessing the power of screen building at this point, and that's using conditional visibility. That means we show the user what they need to see, when, and if they need to see it, and we're taking out those excess things that they don't need to see. So you can do that with decision splits and branching. And the example we have here on the screen is a user has selected a return, and so therefore the corresponding page that is with that selection is being returned to them, right? So we're taking off those excess fields off of the screen, and therefore this is helping screen completion. We're moving the user along. Now this goes hand in hand with our next tip, which is to pre-select those options based on the user's previous actions, right? We're guiding them through the process, helping them to minimize those errors, again, pushing forward screen completion. Now Jen's gonna do a very cool example of this later on in her demo, so I'll let her expand on that one. Now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about specific components and when we should use what when. So let's talk about radio buttons versus drop-down menus. Now drop-down menus are called pick lists in our component library, but they're the same thing. And our general rule of thumb is 5 or more items, you're going to want to move it into a pick list. Whatever you decide to do, make sure your text is scannable and readable. We want to take those big chunks of text off of the screen. Make sure you customize your footer buttons so that the user knows whether they're going to the next step or they're submitting their form. And remove excess buttons that don't correlate to those pages as well. If you're going to have links included on your screen and they're opening up into a new tab, let them know that. And that way they'll know that if they're clicking on this link, they're not going to lose all the information that they've just inputted into these form fields. Similarly, for Salesforce record links, do those after the form has been submitted. Again, we don't want our users worried that they're going to be losing all of the information that they've just filled out. Now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the actual words on our screen. And this goes back to remembering who our user is, right? You're not going to use complicated company lingo or terminology or abbreviations that they're not going to understand. And the same goes with error messaging, right? We want to let them know what they did wrong, again, so we can move them along to form completion. And also the same for global error messaging, so don't put weird text like, you have hit error 278. Nobody knows what that means. And again, we're trying to unblock the user so that they can submit their form. And finally, help text. Where do we put that? Do we put that on the screen, on a link? We love using info icons. This is a great place to hide less important information or good to know information. Let the user decide if they need a little bit more help, and the veteran user can just sail through and ignore that. Again, we're just removing these big clumps of text off of the screen. Great, so you have identified your user. You have used our tips to build this complex form. What is next? Well, before you publish, let's do some user testing. Get your form in front of your users, see how they work, see where they're confused, ask them questions, see what their pain points are. And the cool thing about this is you really only need about 5 users before you get a general idea of what the feedback is. You can take all that information, you can iterate, and be more confident about the screen that you're putting forward. So I'm gonna give this over to Jen now, and she's gonna apply all these tips and ideas to a ScreenFlow solution.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so let's see this in action in a ScreenFlow. So before I get started, we're limited on time. So what I'm going to do is focus on specific features and how to implement them in Flow Builder. So for a more comprehensive deep dive, check out the video that's in the resources. And if you scan the QR code, you're going to get access to all our resources mentioned in today's session. So we sell flow-themed shirts, and our reps aren't creating cases efficiently. So we built a simplified process that helps guide our reps through the case creation process. Not over here. All right. So there are many ways that we can grant access to our ScreenFlow, whether it's through a quick action or embedded in an app or record page. But we wanted to give it global access. So here we launched it through the utility bar. Now in this demo, you'll see a rep guide a customer through an exchange. So here we're working with Andy Young, who's our customer. And we show information that is relevant to the rep. So if Andy is filing a complaint or making a suggestion, we're also gathering the subject and description information. And we provide information in a help bubble that helps guide the reps, but only when they need the help. So how did I do this in Flow? We're gonna go into our Flow Builder and in the screen. And here you see a 2-column section for case details. You can add additional columns if you want, and you could make them, you can also change the width as well. So they don't have to be evenly distributed. Now we're gathering information using a combination of record fields and screen components. And a benefit of using a record field is that you can take on all the attributes of that field automatically. You don't need to replicate it in Flow. But there might be times where you want those attributes to be different, such as the label, requiredness, help text, and reactivity. And note that today, record fields do not support reactivity. So in those cases, you want to use the screen component. And here for the type and priority fields, we're using the standard pick list component, but we're showing it as a radio button. And we're using the standard component because we wanted to show help text that is specific to flow and is not persistent on the case record. And lastly, to conditionally show fields for under certain circumstances, we're using component visibility. And here I'm filtering on specific case types equals true, then show, otherwise we're gonna hide it. All right, so back into our flow, we're gonna do a return exchange. We're gonna save. And next screen, you see a list of all of Andy's orders with us. So if a rep picks an order that is not eligible for return, we're gonna see an error. But if we pick one that is eligible for return, we're going to continue to gather more information about that return exchange. Now, when we're showing a bunch of records, we're going to give the user the ability to search so that they could further filter down those records and easily identify them. So how did I do this? Going back to Flow Builder, we're going to go to our next screen, which is return exchange. And here for the error message, we're showing component visibility. And this is looking at the selected row in that table where the eligible for orders equals no, otherwise it's hidden. Now the data table is a great component to use when you want to show records to your users or allow them to select it. And you can make the table user-friendly to describe what that table is. You then select the records you want to show in the table, and this is usually done using a get records element before you get to the screen element. And as you saw in the demo, for the longer list of records, you want to give the user the ability to search. Next, you configure the rows. So what do you want to do? View only or allow for single multiple selection, and you can make that required for the user. And then you can configure the columns to show in your table. And once configured, you could change the display order by dragging and dropping. You can also customize the column label to make it specific in Flow. All right, so back in our form, we're going to now gather information on a return exchange. And notice that these labels here are relevant to the user. We're not using the same labels that we see on the case record. And for the pick list choices, we're showing it in the radio button because we have 5 or less. We want to expose all the choices and minimize the clicks that your users need to take. However, for the reason for return, we see a bunch of choices here. So we're going to put it in a pick list to minimize the real estate that it takes up. And notice that we have exchange by default. And over here, we're pre-selecting a value based on that exchange. Now, if I change it to return, we've pre-selected another value. So how did I do this? So going back here to our flow, we have a 3-section column. And again, we're using radio buttons here, and we're pre-selecting the value using a formula field. This component is reactive to what we're selecting in that first column. So let's take a quick look at that formula. Not this one, this one. All right, so we have a case statement on the action. If it's return, pre-select this value. If it's exchange, pre-select this other value. All right, so back over to our flow, we're going to do an exchange. And now Andy has the option, does he need help figuring out what to exchange to? So if he does, we're going to toggle yes, and the rep's going to help Andy through and figure out what he wants to exchange it to. So as I'm clicking over in the items in the table, you'll see that we're showing information dynamically based on the selection. So we have the shirt and the shirt type. So how did I do this? So back here over in Flow Builder, we have our toggle here. And if set to true, we have our section that's conditionally set to show that information. So we have the data table, that's a single selection, and we have this display text component that's reactive to what we're selecting in that data table. So here specifically, we're looking at the selected record in the shirt table, and we're looking at the image and type. Okay, so Andy doesn't need any help. He knows exactly what he wants. And we're going to scroll down to the shipping information. And this is very sensitive. Okay, so by default, free shipping through the Postal Service. Andy has the option of standard or expedited shipping through our 2 shipping carriers, Universal Containers and Cosmic Cartons. So as the rep is working with Andy, notice that over to the right, we're seeing the shipping costs and selected method change. How did I do that? So back here in Flow Builder, we're going to scroll down to the 2-column section. And again, we're using a display text component that is reactive to what I'm selecting in the shipping method. So let's take a look at that formula. And we'll go back here. Shipping method. And again, we're using a case statement on the shipping method. So for each choice in the shipping method, we're showing specific information. Now, shipping costs change over time. And what we don't want to do as good admins is hard code those values in our flow. Because if they change, we then need to go into our flow, make the change, go through testing, the whole change management process. But instead, we're using custom labels. And here, if the shipping costs change, we're going into our custom label, and that's all we need to touch. We don't need to touch our flow. Best practice there. All right, and then I'm going to scroll down to the end. And for the return exchange summary information, this information is dynamic based on actions taken in the same screen. So what we were returning as an order and what we're exchanging to. So I scroll up, and let's say I was doing a return. You only see the return information. Scroll back down, and notice that when I don't have the toolbar in the bottom, our buttons are customized to the user. We don't show the standard next and previous button. So how did I do this? So back over here, we're gonna go back into our return exchange. We're gonna scroll all the way down. And surprise, surprise, we're again using a display text component with a formula, and that's reactive. So here, this time we're using an if statement. If this action is returned, we're gonna show the text template for a return. Otherwise, we're gonna show the text template for an exchange. Now note that text templates in themselves are now reactive, but you need to use the plain text. But because we love that rich formatting that you saw in our screen, we're relying on the display text component for reactivity. So quickly going back to the screen, we're gonna scroll all the way to the bottom. And for our footer, we could use the standard next or previous, but we decided to customize it for the user. And we're hiding buttons that don't make sense. So pause has no place in our process, so we're hiding it. Back here, we're gonna submit, and we get the confirmation page with the table that's just view only of the selections we made on the previous screen. If Andy wants to make an additional return, toggle this, and it goes through that same process over again for another item, but we only have the one. So this now automatically created the case behind the scenes. We have this link that goes to that newly created case. But how did I generate that link dynamically? I didn't hard code that. So back over to our flow, we're gonna go to the case link. And when you use the create records element, it automatically creates a variable for you that holds that newly created ID. So we're gonna cut this resource. We're gonna hover over case, which is gonna be our hyperlink. Click on the hyperlink icon, /, paste in our case, and that will dynamically create that link. Now my form consisted of 4 screens that had distinct purposes: case details, return exchange, confirmation, and case link. Obviously, you can consolidate that down even further, but know by doing so, you're just increasing the overall complexity of your screens, and you're going to need to do additional configuration work and testing to ensure the right components are showing at the right time. All right, so you just saw a lot in that demo. Let me give you a quick recap. You just saw how I use reactivity and component visibility to show relevant information, pre-select options, and dynamically show information based on actions taken on the same screen. We took that form and broke it down into multiple screens as needed, and that really cuts down on errors and allows us to group tasks accordingly. And we broke our screens into sections to group components together. We use a data table to show records and allow users to select them. We customized the buttons to make them relevant to the users and hid buttons that didn't make sense, and understand when to use record fields versus the screen components. Use record fields to take on the attributes automatically, but if you want them to be different in your flow, use screen components. And lastly, keep language in mind and hide those good to know information in info bubbles. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who will show us how to take our screen flows to the next level using the Lightning design system.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Kranz. I work for Risk Connect, an OEM partner of Salesforce, where I've been building risk management applications on the platform for, it'll be 12 years this year. I am also a moderator of the SFXD Discord community, as well as you may see some posts from me on unofficialsf.com. Now, as part of what I do on the platform is evaluate all these different great features and techniques and capabilities and find what types of techniques can get the most out of tools like Flow. And what I'm here today is to show you one of those techniques, and that is the ability to bring the Lightning design system, that styling that you're used to seeing across the platform, and bring that into your screen flows. And we're billing it here as an advanced technique, but I think you'll see that it's quite simple to use. And so what I'll do is I'll show you what I mean by all this, and I'll show you how to use it, and then how it works a little bit, and I'll link you to a blog post I wrote about this technique that you can use to reference when you want to go use this in your org. So let me get a little bit into what I mean by this. And so let's take Jen's flow that we just saw, and in this case entry process, let's say that high priority cases get an email sent to executives so that if you enter a case with high priority, you want to make sure the user entering this case knows that's what's going to happen. So we all know that we can use display text to conditionally display a message to the user when that option is selected, but that message is kind of hidden, right? The styling makes it so that you may overlook it. You may not realize how important it is. And so there are things in display text we can do, like make things bold, larger text, make it colored, to make it stand out a little bit more. But then you're getting away from the styling that users are used to, and it still doesn't quite necessarily draw their attention as much as you want. So if we apply a technique that I'm going to show you, you can apply something that the design system calls a scoped notification message. And you can see right away the difference, that your attention is drawn to the message you want to give. And so you start thinking about, well, what else does the design system offer that we can use with this technique? Obviously, the warning message along with success messages, and error messages. Your section headers that you're used to adding to your sections. Well, imagine if you could make them span just a portion of a column of a section instead of the whole width, or if you could make it not collapsible. Those hyperlinks that Jen showed you how to build, imagine if you could draw attention to them by styling them like a button. And that's all in display text, but you can also do this in data tables. A column in a data table, since it can render rich formatting, you can use this technique to conditionally display some styling or display a link styled like a button for every row in that data table. And my favorite part of this technique is that it is native configuration. There is no custom components you'll have to write. There is no package you'll have to install. And you can go and use this in your org today. Now, you might be thinking, that's too good to be true. That can't be right. I'm going to show you exactly how easy it is. So this example that I just showed you earlier, let me go into the builder. We're doing this live. And take a look at the two different display text components that I have to do the non-styled version and the unstyled version. What's the only difference here? This is the unstyled one, just the plain text. And this is the styled one. The only difference is I've got this mysterious reference. Mysterious to you right now, but it's a reference just before the text. And that's what applies the formatting to it. And so that's really all you need to do. I'm not joking. That's the only difference. Now, there is some magic under the hood of what's going on to make it work. And so let me cut back a little bit to this. And so I'm going to get you a little bit of information about why it works and how it works. If it starts to get a little bit over your head, don't worry. You don't need to know exactly why it works for you to use it. All you need to be able to do is add some reference to your display text. But it's important to know. So the Lightning Design System itself consists of resources and guidelines and blueprints. And those blueprints are snippets of HTML that define how some concept should be styled. Like this is a box. And if you take this HTML, or any HTML really, but if you take these blueprints and put them into a text template like I've got here, then you'll find that if you add that resource, that text template or formula, and put that into a display text, you will see that it renders, when you run the flow, like you would expect from the blueprint. That's really the enabling factor of this, is that display text renders those blueprints. But if I put it all into a text template like that, or a formula, then if I want to add another box to my screen flow, if I want to do another message, I have to add another text template to my screen flow, and then put that in another display text. And that's not very reusable. So what can I do? What can be helpful? And you'll also notice that that's not what I was doing in the example I gave you. In the example I showed, I just put the reference right in front of the text that I wanted to style. So how does it work? How did putting just the reference in front of that text make it work? What it relies on is what seems like magic, but it's documented behavior of the underlying component for display text. And what happens is, if you look at what we're giving that component to display, it consists of this opening part of the HTML, which tells it how to style. And then it consists of a closing tag. And that just tells the HTML, hey, I'm done with how I want to structure this. And the magic comes in is that if I omit that ending part of it, then when I run this, the display text component actually is smart enough to automatically add back in any missing closing tags. And what that means is I can just take that starting fragment and put that into my text template or formula. And then when I add that starting fragment into my display text, then I'm free to add the content after it that I want styled. And then display text will automatically close it out and render it how I want. But that's not quite as reusable as I might want yet. So if I do this in a text template or a formula, then I can reuse it across that screen flow on that screen or another screen within the same flow. But if I want this totally reusable across any flow, then instead I'll create custom labels for each of those fragments that I want to be able to use. And then suddenly I have this reusable technique that I can use across any flow in my entire org. So, and if I've labeled it something that's sensible, that tells me what it is, then I can just search for it in the flow resource picker and add it to a display text, and it's styled. So this might, you've seen it simple here, but what should we do? How can this look if I go and upgrade Jen's flow more than just this? Oh, we've been leaving this open too long. Let's continue with our flow here. So we've seen already how a message can be better displayed. So if I select an invalid value here, we've seen how formatting can get you part of the way there, but by upgrading to Lightning Design System, that is a much clearer message. Your attention is drawn to it, and it's consistent with other parts of the platform. And then you can also see how your attention is drawn to the right places as you put this in other areas. Like here, we've got a data table that shows a conditionally styled column. How does that work? I've shown you kind of display text in the messaging, but in a data table, if we open up that screen, all it really is, if I open up to, you'll see it's a different field that I've added. It's a formula field. A formula field, if you apply you can use your custom labels or you can write it by hand, but a formula field, if it uses the design system blueprints, will render appropriately in a data table. So coming back to seeing how else we can upgrade our ScreenFlow user experience. What I think is important to show is I've got a few different examples here, but if I go to, oops. You can see it styled well here, but this final screen here where we created the record link, I think if you apply the Lightning Design System to confirmation pages where you're showing a linked record you created, this is a much clearer message to the user that, yes, it was successful, and here is what you can click to go to the record link. I think with hyperlinks, it's easy to get lost and not know that, hey, here's an easy way to go find that record I just created. So, and it's those kinds of things that are a little bit different, and I think if you go to the blog post that we put a link out to in our QR code, take a picture of that. I'll step back so you can see it. This has a link, amongst other things, to the unofficial SF post that goes into detail about this technique. And so you can go and use this today. You can cut. It has stuff that's easy to copy paste and kind of goes over everything I just told you. I'm going to leave you with some parting advice to keep it simple. The examples I've shown you work very well. It might be tempting to use all sorts of different blueprints that are in the design system. Test it well. Only use it if you've got time to test and make sure that it's actually going to work, because if it breaks your flow, then it's not going to work at all for your users. Balance delivering for your users today with how maintainable your flow is going to be. But I'm going to hand it over to Sam.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. All right, we have about 5 more minutes left, and I'm going to talk about what's coming for the ScreenFlow roadmap. If you were in the roadmap session this morning, I'm sorry, I have no new information for you. It's going to be the same. So no hard feelings if you want to move on to another session. Reactivity is the name of the game for ScreenFlows now. If you are not familiar, if Jen's demo was the first time you'd seen reactivity, hopefully you see the incredible value this is providing. And please check out this trail mix, sforce.co/reactive components is the ongoing maintained source of everything you need to know about reactivity, maintained by Adam White. What's coming soon is reactive choice options via collection choice sets. So you could have a collection coming out of a component on your screen that then is providing the options that show up in your pick list, your choice lookup, your radio button, etc. So that's gonna be awesome. Right now, reactivity is about how do you take advantage of what's already happening on your screen, but sometimes you need more. And what if you want to pull in more data into your screen based on a selection that was made? Action buttons is going to make that possible, going beta in summer. So this is showing I selected some accounts, and now I need to retrieve the context for that account. I didn't know what accounts I was going to select before I got to this screen. Because this is running an auto-launch flow, the world is your oyster. You can pull in additional CRM data, you can reach out to external systems, you can perform more complicated logic and do rich validation evaluations. We are really excited to hear about what everybody does with this, planning to GA later this year. We're bringing you read-only and disabled and also powered by reactivity, which will be the tagline for everything ScreenFlow moving forward. You'll be able to make all your inputs conditionally read-only, conditionally disabled, and so on. We're rolling out a handful in summer, so all the most common basic inputs, text, long text, currency, and then choice components, lookup, dependent pick list later this year in winter. Repeaters was our really big announcement in spring 24. It's currently in beta. We definitely recommend you try it out. If you need to collect multiple instances of the same shape of data from your users, such as all the drivers on your insurance policy or the cars, or this is collecting education history for an application. We're going to go GA in summer. It's going to support all components, including lookup, custom components. The one missing piece is record fields. So if it shows up in the Components tab, it is supported, as well as some of the screen features. And then in winter, we're going to work on adding pre-population to it so you can handle update scenarios. Address got a lot of love in summer. You can now require your address component, which we should have done this a long time ago. I'm sorry. But here we are. I also heard feedback earlier today that we would like to do that also for name. We are looking at it. You can disable your addresses as well, and then we're improving how we integrate with state and country pick lists. This is just, we love when people post and vote on ID Exchange. Please do more of that. It really, really helps us get things like this prioritized. This is a bigger view of all the stuff, some of the stuff I've talked about, some more future thinking about how to make screens more and more and more reactive. We're going to take action buttons and basically take data fetcher, which is an app exchange package a lot of people using reactivity are using now, bring that into Flow. So you don't have to click a button to run those auto launch flows. Bringing input validation for that to be reactive in the screen, so you don't have to click next for your user to get the feedback that they entered something that's invalid. Conditional requiredness. Then also we're going to give, I call it the Chrome, the overall experience of the screen, some love with out-of-the-box progress indicators, since we shipped stages many years ago, and you still have to do that with code, unfortunately. We're going to solve that, as well as allowing custom headers, so you can have screen-by-screen different, H2 level header for your users, which will be great for accessibility and context. And sorry, Jen, I gave you 30 seconds to wrap us up. Thank you,
Sam. Always love seeing the roadmap stuff and screen flows. Awesome. So we're going to have more of Sam and Adam White on Automate This in May. So scan that QR code. It'll give you a link to the live stream page, set your notifications, and then be reminded the day of the event to check out the live stream. So we talked about a lot of resources. Again, it's that same QR code. I'm part of admin relations, and I recommend watching the Automate This playlist if you haven't done so already. We also have a podcast hosted by Mike Gerholt and Jillian Bruce, and my favorite website, admin.salesforce.com. So thank you for joining us for our in-person session. Thank you for those who will be watching this on video on demand. And again, for those in the room, give us your feedback. If you want more ScreenFlow content, let us know, because we take this seriously and we will bring you more content in the future. So thank you very much.